Welcome to Far Realms Radio. I'm Skylar.
And I'm Justin,
This is our podcast of many things.
where we give you eldritch advice to improve your Dungeons & Dragons games.
Let's dive in. Welcome to Far Realms Radio, episode 11. We're going to talk about classes starting this episode, and we're really going to call it the divisions of labor.
D&D really cares about what class you're in.
It does. It's meaningful, and, this might or might not be a reflection of you in society. It's totally up to you. But today, I think we're going to start with the first division of labor, which is the most straightforward one we can think of, and that is the fighter.
The class you choose in D&D is probably the most important choice you make in the game because you really only become more of what you are in D&D rather than dynamically change characters a lot.
Especially in this edition.
You can always multi-class or have a character arc.
But even if you multi-class, whatever you choose first,
you just become better of what you were previously. You usually don't see a huge shift in role or mechanics as you level up.
Right.
So it's a big part of the game in 5th edition particularly. So we're going to focus kind of on that where in its current state, but we'll talk about kind of the history of how the class, where it started, how it got where it is now, how the role has changed, and then we're actually going to go through the mechanics and then each subclass and just kind of go through it and tell you what we think about it.
What they're useful for as DMs and players both, what you can get out of it.
Some ideas.
Why you would this class, why you would this role.
How not to fuck it up too bad. Yeah.
So the fighter didn't start by that name way back when, right? He started by a different name back in 1st edition.
Fighting Man. He's one of the OGs of D&D.
I'm a fighting man.
Was literally labeled Fighting Man in the original game.
It summons to my mind images of Errol Flynn and Tarzan.
It's too on the nose, but because of that, I love it.
And I think that was in the original red box, the first one. You were basically a human fighter, human male fighter, and there wasn't a barbarian. So some of the artwork that they used, right? You could pass it for Conan, basically.
Pretty much. That was you were Conan. You were Fighting Man, Conan.
But then that changed, and in 2nd edition, I think that they made it like a base class. You were, not a fighting man, but you were a fighter. Like your profession was, I fight.
And before that, they actually even added the paladin as a subclass of the fighting man.
Oh, right. It was setting
Greyhawk.
Specific because Greyhawk had special knights, special fighting men that were holy fighting men,
holy magic
and
powers.
They called themselves paladins.
So that's where the paladin showed up, and then
And they were OP back then, by the way. They had healing powers that were off the hook.
It was ridiculous.
You basically wanted one in your party.
People complain about paladins now. I'm like, it's fine.
Yeah,
it's fine. But they actually came in core class, of course, and advanced the hit die to a D10, which is nice to have even then.
One of the things that was fascinating to me in 2nd edition about the fighter was that when you hit 9th level, you got a keep. Just as part of your class.
Yeah.
It didn't give you any more detail around what that looked like, so your character got a keep, and then you as the player could say, DM, I'm 9th level, I get a keep, and then look at your DM expectantly, and then the DM has to be like, God damn it, now I have to figure out how to give you a keep.
What are the rules for this part?
These players do I just get to drop it wherever I want? I point, and then a keep appears on top of that monster. Hey guys, we're going to go hunt the Trask. Come on, let's go.
Right? We're just going to hang out my keep for the rest of the game. We're good. That's all we wanted.
Dudes, I got a keep. What do you want to go outside for? Right? We have a dungeon.
We got dartboards. It's great.
Pool table.
Yeah. But at least even in 2nd edition, they kind of realized sometimes when you're playing a fighter, it can get a little boring because you're just kind of swinging and hitting.
It's the most straightforward class.
It's very straightforward.
You stand up in front usually and fight.
A lot of it really kind of comes down to how you do it and what style you bring to the character. And I think a lot of us, when we first start playing D&D, we look at the fighter and we go, why would I want to play that boring ass class? I'm here for some magic and dragons.
I had that experience, and I had friends had that experience too.
And then you play as a wizard, and you die because
Again.
cats have more HP than you.
And again.
And then you're like, I'm going to try this fighting man over here.
Yeah.
He seems strapping.
I actually really I have liked the fighter because it is what it says on the tin, the class. You know, it looks like it's good at fighting, and it is. And it's really hard to screw it up from a player perspective. You can be up in front with a shield, and that's fine. Oh, you find a fancy magic two-handed sword? Well, ditch the shield and use that. You're still doing all right. You know, you can build a ranged version, and you can just be like
versatile.
Legolas. It is. It's super
It lets
versatile.
the player kind of be whatever kind of fighter they could imagine.
Which means you can almost always have something to do. You know, the only area where the fighter historically sat out at the table was anything magic-y or religious-y. And like sometimes they could be religious-y if they just took that skill or had a background like that, or were a paladin. But in this edition, you can be a fighter and an eldritch knight and have your cake and eat it too.
Yeah, and you first started to see that in the Fighter's Handbook in 2nd edition.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where they started to add additional rules and fighting styles to kind of try and compensate for the fighter not having a ton of special, interesting abilities to use in combat.
Mm-hmm.
And then 3rd edition really changed into the fighter, into kind of the class we know today in terms of at least how it works mechanically.
Yeah, very predictable, very easy to reason through number-wise.
But mostly the focus on the combat feats.
Right.
That was the big thing in 3 and 3.5 that really characterized the fighter, was that you got more feats than anybody else.
And there were more combat feats than any other type of feat.
Exactly. So most of us played with a lot of homebrewed feats in 3.5, at least I did. So you could build some pretty crazy shit as a fighter.
Yeah.
You had the classic combos, like the whole Sentinel extra range.
You could get ACs at low levels, in the high 20s. You know, you would become almost untouchable as
It
a
was
fighter.
ridiculous.
It was one of the classic examples I liked in the old Neverwinter Nights video game, the 3D one, where it used the 3.5 rule set, 3.0 and then 3.5 rule set, and it was pretty faithful representation. And you could take all the characters to 20, and then you could pit them against each other with the max out gear equal for, let's say, a monk versus a barbarian, a monk versus a fighter versus barbarian, whatever you want, and just see what the numbers did. And 10 out of 10 times, the fighter beat the monk, even though the monk had a higher AC, because the fighter had more attacks that dealt more damage.
Oh yeah, his
and
action
could have
economy,
magic
insane.
weapons.
He had like 6 attacks in
So you get
3.5 as a
more-
fighter when you're
more
maxed
overall
out.
bonus, yeah.
6 attacks.
Plus,
It's
you had a
insane.
pretty reasonable AC and more hit points. And
Yeah.
those hit points that the fighter has across all editions,
Is one of its really meat and potatoes.
right? I mean,
quite
it
literally.
means that that player is going to be involved in just about every scenario, every encounter that's happening at the table, unless they get save or died or save or suck. You know, like you're charmed or
Yeah.
you're sleeped or whatever stupid thing like that. I think that 4th edition actually nailed the role of the fighter in tone the best.
I think they really just cemented it.
for the role, but it left some things on the table.
It was definitely the best in the defender role.
Yeah, I mean, if you needed a tank, you were a fighter and you felt good about it, and you could
But you were mobile.
hold
you could
the
deal
line,
a lot of damage.
and you had a lot of hit points. And I played it very well. The thing is, they leaned into the defender part too much of the fighter, and they lost some of the quote unquote striker in 4E parlance that
Yeah.
the fighter could do too. And one of the things I
Definitely.
liked about 3rd edition, and I think 5E brought this back, is that you could build a ranged fighter like a bowman or a crossbowman and be very useful and not have to be a ranger and have to have magic spells.
you could just be a crossbow specialist.
right.
You know?
But 4E just kind of lacked that. Although I think that the way that they managed their mechanics, they nailed the key, giving the fighter some rechargeable resources like any other class. That was the first time we
resource
saw
pool
this.
was cool.
Yeah.
Having like the martial power, like the idea of letting fighters have this resource pool. Don't worry, it's not magic. It's just a different resource.
Right.
The power of will. Just go with it.
Stamina.
Martial power. That's a thing. So he's really determined.
So, I mean, I think that in 5E they did a good job of making the class kind of encompass all of the history of it so far and also keep the flexibility of the fighter. It's very approachable, but I would say if there's a drawback about the fighter in this particular edition is that as you level up, as you said earlier, you just become more fighty, and it doesn't really get more complicated.
You're really good at it, though.
Right.
Like, you are really good at it.
So if you really enjoy that part of the game, like let's say you're a butt kicker type player, then
Or you can bring something to the character that like makes it rewarding for you.
right. But unlike a wizard or a cleric or a druid, you're not
Like
going to
how
have
they commit the murder, like rewarding some way.
yeah, you're not going to have the kind of flexibility and weird that you're going to get out of
weird.
Magic, something else.
Definitely, but it's definitely like super solid class in 5e, super versatile. Like you can build it a lot of ways. Like honestly, a fighter built as a crossbow specialist is probably one of the most OP classes in the game.
Very good. Yep.
And we'll talk about that more, but
as the DM, it's useful to have a fighter around too, because that's a signal from the player that's very predictable. The player says, "I built a class that wants to fight things. I would like to kill them, please, and I'm going to be as good as I can at it." So that's easy to lead down different paths. It's easy to give them something to do at the table.
Great first class to play because its mechanics are straightforward. It starts off strong and stays pretty relevant as the levels go on. It doesn't really fall off. Like Monk kind of falls off after level 6 or so a little bit, but you're like a god at level 6, so you can deal with it. Like right. Level 6 is Monk. That's my favorite time in the game. But the fighter, it starts out strong enough that it's probably the best like single level class dip to do for multi-class.
If you're going to pick any other class, especially for Action Surge.
Yeah. Well, like even if you're just doing a single level dip, like start as a fighter and then switch to every other level thereafter as a class you're going to be. You're going to start with proficiency in every weapon and armor.
Right.
You're going to start with a D10 hit dice worth of health. You're going to get tons of things that are just super front loaded and super handy. Even if you only take that first level, you get a fighting style. It's pretty handy. So definitely probably the first. You get second wind at level 1 even.
Yep.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean survivability, right?
That's that's a one level dip. You could go 2 and get an Action Surge.
This is one of the things. You want to play a character, like I said, you want to play a character who can participate, is probably going to be around having hit points.
Action Surge being one of the best abilities in the game.
The fighter is one of them. And it's even better than the Ranger and the Paladin in this regard. Like the Ranger has more it can do, but the fighter is just tougher, which means it's going to survive longer. Yeah. Even than the Paladin, who can heal.
Yeah, it's a great if you're going to do start as a level of fighter and switch over, because when you take a class as a multi-class and it's not your first level, the proficiencies work a little bit different with weapons and armor. So make sure to read that part if you're going to do that.
Right,
because that tricks a lot of players. You don't just get all of them, unfortunately.
You have to pick.
Yeah. But yeah, good hit die, good weapon and armor proficiency, great action economy, frequent ability score boosts, which translates to more feats if you're playing with feats. You should be playing with feats. If you're not playing with feats,
+1.
Pick a different class because you're going to be a little bored. It's going to be a little lackluster without the feats because you can only raise so many ability scores so high.
So I think let's go through some of the...
I would say the cons, if we had to pick some for fighters.
I mean,
they got
obviously
strength and con are not the best saves.
But, I mean, yes, they're not the best saves. You're likely to be charmed. You're likely to fall prey to will or wisdom saves, I guess, charisma saves. You are equipment dependent. If you lose it, then you're oftentimes SOL. Usually in most of the fighter builds, except for the Eldritch Knight, magic is something that
just not a thing you get. But you can multi-class so easily if you really want it.
Right. Or take a background that gives you access to it.
Yeah, and it can be a little bland if you don't know how to get the most out of the class.
Right, that's what I was saying earlier. I think that really the fighter, its biggest drawback is that it is really kind of what it says on the tin, So as you go up in levels, as you progress more on this class, you're not going to get something weird or outside the box. It's going to give you exactly what you've been doing.
I remember when I first started playing, I'm like, fighter, and my buddy was like, it is what it sounds like. And once I learned it had been fighting man, I was like, oh... okay, you toned it down, and it's still that on the nose that I was like, what the fuck are you talking about? Right? Like, it's always like warrior or knight, in other RPGs. And so I was like, okay. Fighter, cool.
Okay.
I mean, when I heard fighter, I first thought it would be like in a JRPG, like the brawler who uses bare knuckle boxing or something. Like that class.
Like
would
a
be
pit
called,
fighter or something.
Yeah, it would be called like a fighter, in the JRPG.
Mixed martial arts or something.
Yeah, exactly. More of a monk almost. Or a pugilist.
Yes.
Right? Little did I know.
Yeah. I mean, and that's fine for a lot of people. I think that for a lot of the people who have played the game before or looking for complicated crunch out of a D&D type game, which it offers, you get bored at high level. You just have to rely upon the complicated parts are the items and equipment that you get. Instead of the spells that you pick, it's what items and equipment. How do you swap between them? What ones do certain things?
How willing is your DM to give you cool magic items?
If they're not willing to do
Don't
it,
be fighter.
Then make the items more interesting. Yeah, if it's just like, cause in 5e, a lot of the weapons do the same damage die. There's not a big differentiation.
I mean, you're
going to
be good regardless because the game is balanced, assuming you don't have any weapons that are magical and game breaking. But it's one of the most fun parts of being a fighter is you get sweet magic weapons usually.
One of the things that
At least for me,
I like about Fighter 2, and we saw this more in maybe the start of it in 3rd edition, but really it came into its own in 4E and in 5e. I think they nailed it with feats, which is battlefield control. And like Sentinel, I think we were talking about, is
classic combo.
Is a really good one. It basically allows you to stop creatures from moving around the battlefield. And this is an area where I'm of two minds, and I always go back and forth. On the one hand, we should be able to have feats and a system that does not rely upon a grid. On the other hand, the grid makes it so easy.
Oh,
and,
yeah.
It's just very easy to visualize.
Feats.
So,
yeah.
But I think it works well enough in both scenarios for Theater of the
Definitely.
Mind or
So, yeah,
tabletop.
for sure. When we talk about fighters, most of the time it's assuming you're going to have feats available to you. In 5e, it is an optional rule, which is strange for most of us that spend a lot of time with 3.5 and 3rd edition because it's so feat-focused. Pathfinder is also very feat-focused, and that continues in Pathfinder 2. So it's definitely something that you tend to look for if you've played those games. And you'll notice, even in 5e, with feats being this optional rule, you get a feat in lieu of a ability score increase, right? That's
right.
How feats come into the game generally. Most people I know play with that. I don't know any DMs that are like, no feats, because that's why.
Silly.
So, because of that, you get a lot of ability in score increases as a fighter. You get them at 4th level, 6th level, 8th level, 12th level, and so forth. You're probably not going to get to those other levels, so I'm not going to name them right now. But it allows for you to take more feats than you might otherwise as any other class. So it's definitely something to consider when you make a character, you're looking at making a character. You're going to have the classic combos. Sentinel being one of those feats is usually combined with polearm mastery. Right. So what Sentinel does, when you hit a creature with an opportunity attack, the creature's speed becomes 0 for the rest of the turn. So they stop moving. That's a lot of speed reduction.
You imagine you have a spear.
Most spells give you maybe 10 feet of speed reduction until the end of their next turn.
Something like Ray of Frost.
It also means creatures within 5 feet of you provoke attacks of opportunity from you, even if they take the disengage action, which is nuts. It totally disregards disengage. And when a creature within 5 feet of you makes an attack against a target other than you, you can use your reaction to make a melee attack against the attacking creature.
It really makes it easy to control a battlefield.
That's 1 feat.
Right.
That gives you a ton of action economy, the ability to slow a creature to a stop, like with 1 feat. Sentinel alone is a great feat for doing what it says, kind of defending your allies and controlling the battlefield. You combine that with Polearm Master, which means when you're wearing a polearm, which in this case is
spear,
usually like a glaive, halberd, pike, even a quarterstaff, I guess. Other creatures provoke an attack of opportunity from you when they enter your reach. So when they're in 10 feet of you, you can attack them. You get attack of opportunity, and if you hit them, they lose all of their speed. They're not going anywhere.
Right.
It's nuts. It's a
gives
great
you
combo.
A lot of space in
Most
in
of us
in
know
a
this
conflict.
combo. It's very fun.
Right.
It's definitely a combo I used in 3.5 to fun effects. DMs hate it. One weird trick. DMs hate it.
I mean, I think it's better than grappling. And I'm glad that they leaned away from grappling in this edition.
Whoa. Hey, I love grappling.
I mean, it's just still a broken system.
In your next campaign, I'm playing a grappler. Mark my words.
All right.
I will break the game.
Yeah, good luck.
Yeah, it's really hard to in 5e, but I will do it.
So I think we should probably talk about what some of the subclasses are that you get. But
wait, we got to go over one other ridiculous feat combo that I want to talk about.
Okay.
The sharpshooter feat plus crossbow expert. This one is another one that's pretty ridiculous because you can build for range damage. You can chunk out a ton of damage and you're just as tankly as a melee combatant. Mm-hmm. So by the time they enter melee range and you switch to a melee weapon, they're pretty torn up already. Sharpshooter is pretty straightforward. You pretty much ignore cover when you do ranged attacks, which in 5e, ranged attacks are really powerful, so cover is really important. Not all groups play with that in effect, though. Yeah,
and honestly, so as playing a ranger who dual wields, and I compare this in fighter classically, these are the two, right? You know, which is better at that archetype.
Yeah.
I think that cover, it makes more of an impact in this edition, but also ranged attacks are so powerful that it doesn't matter that much.
They're great.
Even if you take they're uncover and I have disadvantage.
Well, yeah.
Still, if you get more attacks.
If you play a ranged character and you're kicking a lot of ass, a DM's likely to use cover to kind of shut you down a little bit.
Absolutely.
So it's kind of the player's trump card to be like, nah, brah, like I can somehow shoot around it. It doesn't even matter.
Right.
You just become Green Arrow. So, just Hawkeye, right? Straight up. And then crossbow expert. So you ignore the loading quality of crossbows with which you're proficient. You can make ranged attacks while enemies are within 5 feet of you without suffering disadvantage on those attacks. And when you use the attack action and attack with a one-handed weapon, you can use a bonus action to attack with a hand crossbow you're holding. So you can essentially you can shoot twice in a round with crossbows. You can ignore the loading property, and you can do it in melee.
So one of the things
pretty fucking great.
One of the things that's confusing about this is why this over dual wielding.
Well, also
right?
this means you can run out, boop, 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 hit people, run back behind cover.
This one has a real benefit that you can. There's one thing that this build for shooting does that Ranger can't achieve unless he goes to these same routes too, same feats as well, and it'll take longer. Which is this build can attack with a ranged weapon in melee, which normally is disadvantage. So you basically assume that you're just shooting all the time.
Yeah,
and it's nice. You can do also the other benefit is you can do multiple attacks with one weapon as opposed to with the dual wielding build when you have two.
And
so
you
it's
have
a little
hand
cheaper
free still, which is good.
And if you have an enchanted crossbow, for instance,
dual wielding also plays into this. Yeah, exactly.
Right. And where I think there's some debate is what happens if you have all of the above, including dual wielding. Right, so you only have one bonus action. It doesn't give you another bonus
it doesn't
action.
really matter.
Right. So there's some wasted resource there.
Right.
So there's some balance. I guess the gripe that I'm saying here is the con is you have to pay attention to where the overlap is between the feats and the builds, because it's easy to pick something that has an overlap and that when in reality it's that you have to use a bonus action to do either one of that extra attack, and you only get one bonus action in a round, so you have to be careful. This was intentional.
This is very true.
They limited the amount of attacks you could get in a round quite intentionally, because that's how you get powerful in this game.
It's extremely like the things that matter in the mathematical economy of D&D 5th edition is your HP pool, how much action economy you have, how much damage you do with that action economy. That's it.
Yeah, basically.
Initiative honestly really doesn't matter, except for how your ego feels. Because I like going first.
I think.
A low initiative makes you sad.
One of the fun things to try in a group is rolling for initiative every round. It really pays off for characters.
Honestly, that's my favorite way to play.
Lean into that.
When I used to play like pedantic 3.5.
It does slow things down at the table, though.
It does. But when you build like a character around it and you're so fast, it's so nice.
I know. As a character who has advantage on initiative, it's like, man, I wish that was more useful. It is still useful.
It's fun, but not how useful is it? Who knows?
Right.
But I think you make good use of it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think we've been talking for a bit. We should stop in and take a brew.
We should do that. There's always a tavern.
Right,
you always
here.
start or end up in a tavern. Thank God we didn't start in one. I fucking so tired of starting in taverns and games. I'm so tired of it. But this one, let's go in there.
It's fine to stop into like this one.
We're stopping in. We're not starting there. Welcome to Tavern Talk, the part of the show where we toast to you. Thank you for listening. And
review a brew.
We review a brew real quick.
So this week, we're reviewing Pliny the Elder, and this is from Russian River Brewing Company here in California.
This is very popular here in California.
It's popular, I think, a lot of other places. I had a friend who used to buy this and ship it on Craigslist to people who were just willing to beer swap, I guess it's called.
Yeah.
It was new to me, but this is a popular one. You picked this one for a particular reason relating to today's episode. Tell me about that. I learned something from this.
We're doing fighters, and fighters are super versatile. And Pliny the Elder was a freaking Renaissance man. Before the Renaissance, obviously. But he did everything. He was a warrior, writer, did all the stuff. It tells you on the bottle of the beer right here his story.
So he was a fighting man.
He was a fighting man, exactly, in a lot of fields. And Pliny the Elder and younger also wrote some of the Greek fantasy bestiaries that kind of are like
Thank you for pronouncing it correctly.
Ancient, I know I did that just for you because it bugs me too. And it's literally the OG monster manual. Like they wrote the OG monster manual. Half the things in there don't fucking exist.
I know.
I love it. So I saw it and I thought it was fitting for the fighting man that he was.
Yeah, I didn't know any of that about Pliny the Elder.
Yeah.
I knew he was a scholar. I didn't know any other stuff. I was
Yeah.
like, so there was like 2 of these, right? Elder and the Younger. That's about it.
Oh, it was his nephew, I believe.
Thank you, public school education.
Yeah, that's how I do. But
So
yeah,
tell me what you like about
pretty
this
good.
beer.
I mean-
Because I've had Pliny the Elder a number of times, and it does what it does, in my opinion, really well, but it isn't one that I would pick for myself unless it was the last choice. But you like this, and a lot of people do.
I really like it. It's a very, very drinkable double IPA. It's not overpowering on the palate.
It is decidedly a double IPA.
Part of that is they like you to drink it fresh before it has chance to change too much when it's in the bottle.
Yep.
I think it's very drinkable. It's pretty good, pretty fresh.
I think the thing that I would...
It's not quite like a German beer garden beer, though.
It's not.
And I almost want it to be that whenever I have it, and I have to remind myself.
It has the
that it's-
ABV to be that,
exactly.
Like it's very strong, but it's stronger than, in my opinion, most other IPAs I drink, and it's not...
For me, on the bitterness side, it's not.
No, I don't mean strong bitter. I mean in alcohol content.
Oh, definitely, yes.
So for getting me as cronked as it gets me, I want a stronger flavor. And it's a very mild
It's almost too
taste.
mellow for the alcohol content.
Right.
Yeah, almost.
Which I'm like, okay, I get it, and that's
But I
probably
feel
why it's
that's
popular.
I feel like that's Pliny's jam. He's walking around drinking some brew that everyone doesn't think is that alcoholic, and he's just drunk as fuck.
It really will fight you.
Yeah.
I mean, that's you're probably right. That's a classic fighter thing to do.
Yeah, right.
Anyway, it's a good beer though. I always appreciate it, and it's not cheap. So
Yeah, no, it's a good one.
It's
highly
solid.
recommend if you can get it fresh, as the bottle says.
having had it at their brewery in Russian River, it is better when you get it there. And the bottle is great. I guess that's true of most beer, but this is, if you're able to get there and try it, oh man, just don't drive yourself there.
Yeah. Also, we need to talk about our contest that's coming up.
Right.
New year, new dice.
Everybody needs new dice at some point.
So-
Maybe it's a new campaign. Maybe it's a new character.
Yeah.
Maybe it's just a new luck.
On the Twitters, we will post pictures of the dice that you can win. And it's going to be the same as last time. How do they win, Skylar?
There's going to be a raffle. You're going to share our show, and you're going to give us proof that you shared our show. And then we'll enter you into a raffle and pull a name, and we'll get one lucky winner.
So if you're on Twitter, just throw hashtag
Far
Far
Realms
Realms
Radio.
Radio. And if you're sharing it any other way, just take a quick screenshot, send us proof to farrealmsradio@gmail.com.
Or you can tweet it at us, too.
Or you can tweet it at us, whatever. Just share the show, send us some proof, and we'll throw you in the raffle.
Good luck. Shall we go back to talking about fighting people?
Yeah, I'm glad we didn't start in this tavern, though. I'd be fucking pissed.
It would. I mean, I get it. Tavern is an easy and lazy DM construct,
so over it,
but we can be better than that, can't we?
Good thing we only stopped by.
All right, thanks, Tavern. Time back to show. Time to go back to
Back
the
to
show.
the show.
Okay, so
We're back.
time to talk about when you're fighting and you get a class feature. I think it's a third level for every
Third
class.
level for the fighter, your martial archetype. That's what
and
it's
this is
called
a
for the
new
fighter.
and great thing I like about fighter that diversifies the class and lets it do a lot of
So,
really cool stuff. That
Back in the day, this was the prestige class.
Prestige
because
class
you
or a
almost-
multi-class.
Yeah, you usually one sometimes required the other. Mm-hmm.
Often.
My favorite one did, and it's the first one we're going to talk about. The Arcane Archer.
Oh, the Arcane Archer was a difficult one to get, and they were
You had to be a
certain-
fighter and a wizard, I believe, in 3.5. It was a pain in the ass.
Yeah, and you felt like you were just lame for a while until you got
You were
this
super
class.
lame until you got
and
the
then
prestige
you become
class.
very, very good at that
And
one
you're like
thing.
magical green arrow.
Yeah,
it was
basically.
fantastic.
Basically.
So in 5th edition, they added Arcane Archer when they did Xanthar's Guide to Everything.
That's
We
why I'm
didn't-
not
we-
finding it in my player's handbook.
Yep, exactly. It's not in the player's handbook. This one is in Xanthar's. In the 5th edition, the Arcane Archers are they study a unique elven method of archery that weaves magic into the attacks to produce supernatural effects.
Mm-hmm.
It's assumed that this has been kind of disseminated across other races over the centuries by members of other races, but generally it is written flavor-wise as a kind of an elvish tradition.
Which I kind of resisted because I was like, come on, really? It's got to be elves. It can't be anybody else figured this out.
It's always kind of attached to that a little bit. And that's the one part of the class I'm like, did it have to be?
Right.
I mean, I don't know. But they did. So looking at the abilities...
It's also one of the most powerful prestige classes fighter can get if you're going in the ranged route.
Oh, in 3.5, yeah, it was great. I loved it.
Yeah.
It's not too bad in this one either. So the first ability is you get it third. It's Arcane Archer Lore, and this is where it leans into that lore a little bit more. So Arcane Archer Lore, you get it at third level. You essentially get either the Arcana or the Nature skill. You get proficiency in one of those.
Like from Wizard or Druid.
Yeah, essentially. And then you learn Prestidigitation or Druidcraft, which are pretty much the same spells with different flavors.
Yeah, I mean, right. Is it arcane or is it nature-y?
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, you pick one of those. That's pretty much it. So, that... I don't know how I feel about that one. It's like, that's cool. It makes sense, but to have proficiency in those skills, but it...
You know, in this edition in particular, they tried to disincentivize
I like that it gives you
multiclassing.
arcane and druidy, so you can lean away from the elf bit if you want to.
Right, you can pick
just
which
be
one you
pure
want.
arcane archer.
But this very much looks like, all right, rather than multiclass between fighter and one of the other classes, just take this archetype.
I mean, I'm glad we don't have to do that for prestige classes anymore.
Yeah,
and subclasses kind of
will
provide some of that.
But they also tried to make it look like in this edition, instead of multiclassing, just take the archetype that fits what you want to do. And I think that mostly works.
Mostly.
It's just sort of a little bit of a guardrail, especially for players coming from prior editions like me.
And the weird one for this is this subclass, you could put it under the ranger and no one would question it for a second.
Absolutely.
It's almost stranger that it's still under the fighter.
Yeah.
Because everything about it flavor-wise says ranger.
I mean,
like,
yes.
The range, right? Like, the ranger gets more class features that focus on ranged attacks, even. Mm-hmm. Either way, it's still a great fighter subclass. Arcane Shot is kind of the signature move of this subclass. You get it at third level. It gives you 2 Arcane Shot options, and you get more as you level up, 7th, 10th, 15th, 18th, which is cool. You get 2 uses of the ability, and it refreshes on a short rest as well as a long rest, so it's good. And my favorite thing about it is it's just like, I think it's a Smite ability that does this. You decide to use the option after you learn if the arrow hits. So that way you're not always wasting your resource, and so you can use it a lot and not be worried like you're going to just waste it on a shitty attack roll.
It makes it feel good when you use it. At some point, I'm going to build a version of this that's Mega Man.
Oh, yeah. I think that works quite well.
Pew, pew, pew.
Just Warforged, Arcane, Archer.
Yeah.
I mean, there's some good weapons for that, I think, in the Eberron book.
Yeah.
That's all I've always wanted to do, just be Mega Man in D&D. Like, it's always been kind of a dream of mine.
It'd be hard to build Sonic or Mario, but Mega Man you probably could.
Oh, Mega Man and Zero? Fuck yeah.
Zero,
you can build
totally.
those, no problem. 7th level, you get a Magic Arrow, so you get the ability to infuse arrows with magic, so you can essentially make your attacks non-magical. You can choose if they're magical or non-magical. You learn Curving Shot at 7th level.
This is basically about overcoming obstacles, right? How do you overcome...
Curving Shot's cool, though, because it's like you miss the attack, and it like curves around, comes back, and hits the enemy. That classic arrow move.
Right.
So you can do that against a different target, too, which is kind of cool. And then you get Ever Ready Shot at 15th, which essentially means if you roll initiative, you have no uses of Arcane Shot remaining, you regain 1 use of it. Which is handy if you're out of resources at that point, which is great. At 15th level, you probably have a lot more options of things to do.
One would hope.
But it's nice never going into a fight totally empty.
True.
Your quiver is never empty. So I think it's a pretty solid one. It really kind of hinges on the Arcane Shot options that you choose.
Right.
There's a lot of them, which is kind of cool. I like how many options that they gave.
It's basically pick your theme, right?
Yeah.
Shadow, seeking, piercing.
The cool thing is it's very Green Arrowy in that each one has like a status effect or it does something extra rather than just a elemental type of damage. Like, you know, it's not like just like the arrows from Legend of Zelda. They're like, oh, and fire damage.
Right.
You know, which I would not be opposed to as long as it did something else.
I think the fighter in my mind, when I'm balancing a new class or a new class feature, is the baseline. I always start with this, and I think it makes it easy to reason through balancing because it's such a very direct and straightforward class in all of the ways it does everything. But I like its flexibility, and the next one is actually my favorite of the fighter archetypes, martial archetypes that you pick, the Battle Master. And part of why I like this one...
Oh, I love this one.
...is because it represents in my mind what fighter best is. You know, a fighter should be the kind of person, and this is just Skylar's opinion, but it should be the kind of character that can pick up and excel with any weapon.
Well, I mean, it's in the class description in the handbook that they can do that, and you do get proficiency in all of them.
Yeah,
but I totally agree with you. The Battle Master, I think, really embodies like the description of the fighter the most out of all the subclasses.
And it's basically like you are
the most fightery of fighters.
You are the best. You are the best at fighting. The idea of combat, and it doesn't matter what the weapon is, or where you found it, or whose it was, or if you took it from them, or if it broke and it was whatever. You can use it, and you can excel. And that's part of what I love about it. And it makes it very easy to just like always have something to do in any kind of conflict.
I also love because it has a little subsystem to it. I love that they did
combat
this
superiority.
The little subsystem. It's exactly what the fighter class needs because it's so straightforward. Its class features are super duper straightforward, which we didn't talk about, but we should have. They're really straightforward and very handy. So
I mean, I think that the part of that these are the class features. It's all right. The thing that what I like about the combat superiority, I agree, is that it gives you a little resource pool that you can manage of dice. And one of the things that this, I think, is something that D&D stumbled into in this edition that I don't know if it was as intentional as it feels, is the fighter having combat superiority dice to manage, where you set them on the table, which ones you have.
Like you have magic.
It's kind of like magic, but it's sort of like a gambling game. It's a little bit like, what dice are you willing to roll? And I like that. I like that has this kind of tone of how you spend your dice. This is other systems do this really well than D&D, and how they bolted this onto here, it feels nice. It feels reflective of the risk that a fighter undergoes in a battle. It's a gamble every time you go into a fight. So, I am superior in the battle. Here are my dice to back it up.
Yeah, I like it. So essentially, it boils down to you get 3 maneuvers when you first get 3rd level, which is pretty handy. And then you get two additional maneuvers at 7th, 10th, and 15th. Not one. You get 2 of them at each of those levels. And there's a good amount of maneuvers to pick from.
There are.
They're not all, in terms of power gaming sense, equal, but they are a lot of fun, a lot of options.
Right.
And it's something that's easy to bolt homebrew onto, right?
Power
you
gaming
can find tons of other maneuvers out there.
Power gaming, too, is very much about how do I maximize my numbers so that if given the circumstance that I can use them, I get the best result. But I think that there's another way to optimize, which this optimizes for, different than power gaming, which is how to have something to do in a round. And maneuvers are really good for this because the fighter, especially if you're a melee fighter, isn't going to have a lot to do other than try to run toward the ranged combatants. But if you have a bunch of maneuvers, then you may have the option to do other kinds of things in the battle too. You can, it gives you just more choice, which is almost never a bad thing for a player.
Unless you're a new player and you've got handed a wizard.
Well, then provide them some clear...
What all these spells do.
Make sure that they signed the EULA. They should know what they're getting on board for before they choose that.
You said you wanted to play a wizard. Here's your spell book.
Right, so
study up.
They're not quite like spells, but they're very much like it. I sort of equate them kind of like to barbarians' rage powers.
I think it's fantastic. You start with 4 of them, and they're D8s, not even D6s.
Right, to spend them on various kinds of things.
Fantastic.
Yeah, so this is one area in which I think the fighter really shines. It's how to have something to do always, and based on maneuvers or these superiority dice, how do I make any of the given attacks I have feel like they were worthwhile.
In the 3rd level, you also get Student of War, which is proficiency with the one type of artisan's tools of your choice, which is whatever, kind of a flavor thing, I guess.
I think this is a nod to Pliny, actually. It's a flavor thing. Because
it's exactly that.
Those old soldiers, the old generals like Cincinnatus and Pliny and all of these also were craftsfolk sometimes. And they would have some special skill. Like Cincinnatus was a farmer, in addition to being the general that led the Roman Empire twice. All this kind of stuff. So I think it's great. You got to have something to do when you're not fighting. Right. And even if you are a character who lives for the fight and so on, what do you do when you're resting and meditating? There's something, and there's strong precedent for this. So I like that they baked in these flavor bits into the class.
I do. But it's never you don't mind it at this level because you also get combat superiority, which is freaking amazing. This is like a little after notation that you get. But sometimes when you're looking at your subclass and you get just like, oh, cool, you got proficiency in this skill. And you're like, but I don't want to wait 4 levels for that cool thing that makes my class what it is because I won't get to use it very much in this campaign. So I don't know. Sometimes when I see a subclass that's really end loaded rather than front loaded, I'm like,
Why?
I don't see myself ever taking that.
Right.
Unless you're playing a higher level campaign.
Start that level.
Because it's just like, if that it hinges on that ability to feel like that subclass should feel, and it's laid in there, I don't know. But this one continues to also get other cool things. At 7th level, you get Know Your Enemy, which is one of the few cool abilities where if you spend a minute observing a creature inside or outside combat, you can essentially, the DM will have to tell you 2 of these things. Strength score, dex score, con score, armor class, current hit points, total class levels, if any, fighter class levels, if any. It's one of the few times you see these mechanics cross over really hard into the player game level, right? Like, how's your DM going to tell you in character he has a 19 in strength? He looks real tough.
What I like about this, though, is that it's about information exchange. The DM has this information, and one of the components of the game is, as players, especially fighters, who have a set number, they know what they need to roll to hit certain ACs. And as any DM will notice...
They will deduce it after a couple rounds of combat.
They figure out what the AC is. And so sometimes the DM will just be like, you're aiming at AC 18, and start there. He's wearing full plate, but he looks kind of slow. AC 18, and give it to you. But not always. So here's an explicit mechanic that hangs a lampshade right on that thing and says, the DM has the AC, sometimes the players do too. Here is a way that you can get whatever information your DM isn't telling you that you want that can affect the fight.
I like it, and it's also such a fightery anime thing. Like, you can sense his power level by watching him for a minute. It's fantastic. I love it. You know, I always
Their power level is over 9,000.
I always look how, like, can I make this more anime in my characters?
Can I build Goku?
I like the drama of it. Not necessarily Goku, you know.
Okay, Vegeta.
Vegeta, you know.
Piccolo?
Piccolo, yeah. Vegeta's also a mass murderer, so there's kind of that.
Krillin, you could definitely build Krillin.
I like how we're always just forgetting that part. Like, no, that's cool.
Right, yeah, just don't worry about it.
I'm like, yeah. So, and then your combat dice get better. And then at 15th level, you get the kind of the similar ability to the Arcane Archer. If you start a combat, you roll an initiative. If you don't have any superiority dice, you regain 1, which is great. And
always have something you can do.
The maneuvers are fantastic. I think some of them are really handy. Some of them are kind of useless almost compared to others, but they're great for flavor. The nice thing is you get to learn a lot of them. You learn 3, and then every time you learn more, you learn 2, which is nice. I don't really know of any other thing where you get 2 every time you level up.
I mean, wizard spells.
Maybe wizard spells, yeah.
It's directly comparable to that. You know, it's very much like you're leveling up your powers, and these aren't spell powers, they're fighter powers. And they have a different refresh rate for many of them, you know, but they allow you to affect the conflict in some tangible, strategic way.
Yeah, my favorite one, I think, is Commander's Strike. So I want to go over this one. I think this one's cool because it reminds me of the Lord from 4E. When you take the attack action on your turn, you can forego one of your attacks and use a bonus action to direct one of your companions to strike.
Super useful.
Super cool. So I like that. I think that's a fun one. And also, you get to add your superiority die to the attack's damage roll. Ridiculous.
Right. So when your barbarian is up there, the fighter can be like, go! And then the barbarian gets another attack plus with my bonus.
Hook, smash.
Yeah, basically.
Right? That's where you're telling Hook to smash, and you're giving him that extra bonus die of damage. So that's my personal favorite of the maneuvers.
I think that you'd be remiss if you didn't talk about the trip attack, which is still OP in every edition.
It used to be a feat, and now it's just this.
Tripping is just always overpowered.
I think it's even an optional rule in the DMG, perhaps, or the Player's Handbook.
Yeah, for normal trip attacks. Just but this one gives it to you explicitly.
This is one that the DM can't tell you can't do.
Right.
Because it's right there.
Exactly. Because I spent my class feature on it.
It says right here in the Player's Handbook.
So I think it's worth talking also about the Cavalier, which has always kind of sat between a bunch of different things.
It's a hard one to do right. Cavalier is generally the mounted combat kind of niche.
Pathfinder made it its own class.
Yeah,
it often has sat in the Paladin camp for a while.
Yep. It's definitely a Paladin thing with like the fine steed or whatever ability they always seem to have.
Right.
I honestly, like, this is when I was like, oh, okay. And then I read the mechanics and I was like, I fucking love this, and it's really good. And you really can just ignore the mount, and it would still be freaking great.
I'm glad that they made it, though, something that players can opt into, because it allows DMs, maybe actually I'd say it forces DMs to think about how they can give players steeds.
And honestly,
and
I
how do
think
they not just have... it's so easy to make it so they don't have any kind of mount, you know?
Exactly. And mounts are great. I love when mounts are a tactical thing to get across certain areas or distance farther, or when they provide some kind of combat advantage.
Yeah.
The one issue is, how are your horse going to squeeze through those little bits of the dungeon?
Exactly.
Right? So I think one of the quick, easy solutions for this is, if you have a player who really wants to do this, if you can guide them towards a small-sized character, so they can have a smaller mount, a medium-sized mount.
That's how you solve that. That's interesting.
Yeah, exactly. That's like my first way to solve that is, yeah, you could do that, but you're going to have to be a small character, so you can have a medium mount, so this is not a ridiculous like pain in the ass if you guys are doing some spelunking, which you will probably do.
I probably would have leaned into more like the Drizzt version, which is, how am I going to get you a mount that you can summon and dismiss immediately so that I don't have to worry about this anymore?
You just know Find Steed? Oh, cool. You just know the spell.
Here's a magic figurine that gives you a riding panther.
Oh, look, you have it as part of your background,
you
okay?
have Battle Cat.
Just take it. Just take it. But yeah.
Do me the favor and take the magic item.
There's that to consider as a DM, like them having a mount. The other thing to consider is it going to be a controlled mount, or is it going to be a mount that has its own initiative and actions? How are you going to play out that extra action economy for that player?
The DMG has guidelines on this,
There's
but
guidelines
really,
in there.
At the end of the day, you should choose whichever I think the player wants, and which you as the DM are willing to adjudicate. Yeah. It can be either. There's no balance issue really in both.
I would feel like it's a controlled mount, given that they are a trained cavalier, if they're on their own mount, you know. But anyways, let's go through it. So third level, it has kind of that bonus proficiency, like flavor bit to lean into being like a knight, you know, compelled to right wrongs and earn prestige and go on glorious adventures. Mm-hmm. So animal handling, of course, history, insight, performance, or persuasion. Alternatively, you can learn a language of your choice. I would almost always go with the skill.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely.
Why? You're not going to roll on language.
Unless you built your character wrong and need to course correct by learning a language that you're interacting
maybe
with.
mid-campaign you want that language. You could. It could be useful if you're playing a very diplomatic type of campaign where that matters. It could be good.
I mean, and actually, now you say that, I could see that, given that this is basically a knight you're building.
It's for the flavor, for the knight bit.
The courtly bit.
Yeah, exactly, the courtly bit.
I learn another language, my liege.
Yes, exactly. So at level 3, you get born to the saddle. Essentially, you get advantage on saving throws if you're trying to knock off your mount. If you do fall off and you fall no more than 10 feet, you land on your feet. And
you're basically a cat.
Yeah, you're basically a cat if someone tries to knock you off your mount. But the really important part of this one is mounting or dismounting a creature costs you only 5 feet of movement rather than half your speed.
That's super important.
So that's something to consider, because if you're mounting a creature, it's just like prone to standing. You're going to spend half your movement doing that. So that's super handy.
Absolutely.
To have, for sure. Especially if you have a larger character, a larger mount. Also at third level, this is also third level. It's pretty front loaded. So this is Unwavering Mark. This is straight out of 4E. At third level, you can menace your foes with a mark, I guess. You menace them.
I mean, you're a knight. Ha ha ha.
Yeah, I guess
I will challenge you.
In my head, you essentially Zorro them.
Yeah,
you draw the Z on them, and then I guess that helps. So essentially, you hit a creature with a melee attack. You can mark the creature until the end of your next turn. If someone is within 5 feet of you, a creature marked by you has disadvantage on any attack roll that doesn't target you. So essentially, you're penalizing that creature for not targeting you. It's almost a taunt, right? An indirect taunt, essentially.
Yep.
That creature wants to attack you because it's not going to have disadvantage like it does on the other targets. Also, if it deals damage to anyone other than you, you get a free special melee attack against the marked creature as a bonus action on your next turn, which is great.
It basically makes the target.
It's like,
your
fight
bitch.
Me,
right,
and only me.
And if they don't, then you're like, ha smack! I told you, ha smack! I told you again.
You shall not pass.
Right,
we're gonna fight, you and me. So you get advantage on that attack roll on that special melee weapon attack. It's pretty great. And if it hits, the attack's weapon deals extra damage to the target equal to half your fighter level. So those guys are really going to want to attack you instead of your ally.
Does it cost, though? It's tied to your strength mod?
It is. You can use a number of times equal to your strength mod?
Yep, minimum of 1, which is
a long rest.
Weird to have it not be strength or dex, But
yeah, if you have a dex-based fighter, you kind of get fucked by this a little bit, which is
so
not
you're not
cool.
going to build a fast knight.
I guess you're less unwavering because you're just like you're not as buff, so you're not as scary.
I'm
so
dexterity.
Remember,
so
it says
I'm
at the
definitely
start
more wavering.
you menace your foes, and you're just too lithe to menace. Lithe to menace them.
Yeah, I guess. I don't know. I thought the menacing part was from the weaponry, but whatever.
Yeah. Anyway, you
So
learn a different maneuver at level 7.
You get a warding maneuver, and it basically lets you fend off strikes that are attacking you or your mount.
You kind of choose who it hits.
Right. It's basically anything that within 5 feet of you is hit by an attack, you can roll a d8, and it has a reaction. You have to have a melee weapon or a shield, and then you add that number to the target's AC.
That's ridiculously good.
Sort of like, hey, if you stand next to me...
and if the target hits, it has resistance against the attacker's damage.
Right. If you stand next to me, I will defend you.
Dude, you're just like Captain America all of a sudden. That is really freaking good. Because think about this combined with Unwavering Mark, right? They want to attack you. If they don't, you punish them. And if you don't, you just block it anyway.
Right.
1d8 to an AC. I can't think of other abilities that are, hey, you get 1d8 to your AC that frequently.
I kind of wish it was 2d4 instead of 1d8.
That just makes it even better.
I mean,
it should already be a 1d6. Let's be real. Like,
that's probably true.
You're at 7th level though, so I could
2d3? No, 1d6.
At 7th level, I could see the 1d8 being reasonable. But you get resistance even if it hits.
You do. Only number of times equal to your con mod. Again, fighter resource management.
But if you're playing this subclass of the fighter, it's strength and con for you, right?
I mean, and it doubles down.
That's really what it comes down to.
With the next power you get at 10th level for this, which is hold the line,
this
right?
Is a strength and con subclass.
Right. This is basically the Cavalier is the one you're going to pick to
you take the
maintain the line.
You get a reach weapon, you get
Classic
Sentinel,
defender.
and you get Polearm Master on this class. It's nuts. Mm-hmm. Oh, and don't forget you have Action Surge and Second Wind on top of all of this.
It's true.
That's the thing to remember when we go through the subclasses is you can always do an Action Surge. And really, those subclasses, some of them, especially some we'll talk about later, become extra nuts.
The Action Surge gives you another action, which means you can do all kinds of...
you can do all kinds of crazy things.
I mean, and it continues to go back and forth between holding the line sort of as a defender type and also a mounted character as you get to 15th level and then 18th level with Ferocious Charger and Vigilant Defender.
So essentially,
this subclass assumes that you are going to be mounted and on the front line of the battle guarding everybody else. And if there are multiple melee combatants in your party, then they get stronger when they're next to you. So
essentially, hold the line is pretty much a free Sentinel, right? Gives you most of Sentinel.
Mm-hmm. It does.
And then if you combine it, so what it does
is wield a pole arm or a javelin, a lance.
Essentially, creatures provoke an attack of opportunity from you when they move 5 feet or more while within your reach. It's kind of like 3.5. And if you reach a creature with an opportunity attack, the target's speed is reduced to 0 until the end of the current turn. I do not miss 5 footsteps. But you combine that with something like Reach Weapon, Sentinel. This subclass, regardless of even whether you're mounted or not, is very strong. I like it. It is defendy.
And then it just, like Ferocious Charger, it scales up more as you go. It's basically...
this one I almost feel like should be a lower level ability.
I agree, especially for 15th level.
Right? Maybe like flip that and one of the other ones, but not bad.
But you can use it each turn.
Wow, that's nice.
Right? Which is why I think it's 15th level. It basically gives you like I'm going to run you down.
This is I'm going to run you down with my lance ability.
Again and again and again and again.
I like it.
And then finally, Vigilant Defender at 18th level. It basically gives you a reaction once on every creature's turn,
except your turn.
Except yours, which is different than normal reaction rules.
It doesn't eat up your usual reactions.
Correct.
You get a special reaction,
which just gives you an extra attack. This is basically like you are standing in the middle of combat.
Opportunity attack. Yeah. And that's at 18th level. You combine that with Sentinel and whatever else you have, it's pretty handy. But 18th level, doesn't really matter. A lot of the time I look at those and I'm just like, that's a cool idea.
Right.
The chance that factors into the game ever is so low.
It is one of my goals always to get the party to 18th level.
Well, then we should just start at like 15th sometime soon. I'm a start at level 3 kind of guy myself. Anyway, so we should talk about this one because it's...
The champion.
It is pretty much.
It's what I imagine when I think of a Roman gladiator.
Me too. That's what I see when I see this one.
This is basically not your knight. This is not your heavy defender. This is the one that it doesn't even necessarily have to wear heavy armor. It's mostly around how do I get a critical with my weapon and do the most damage I possibly can.
The flavor description is the archetypal champion focuses on the development of raw physical power, honed to deadly perfection. Those who model themselves on this archetype combine rigorous training with physical excellence to deal devastating blows. So very much the gladiator description. Like,
how do I be a crit machine?
It's... Remember taking the keen feat back in 3.5? You're always trying to get like that
keen
scimitar.
Was a magic item ability and then improved critical. Both. You could get like 15 to 20 threat range.
The serrated scimitar. You know, you're like, my crit range is like 15 to 20. And your DM's like, I hate this.
So... I think that this leans into that very much. It gives you right off the bat improved crit, 19
which is
and 20.
a big deal.
And then
that's a lot,
right? But it also makes you very much able to do like leaps and jumps and climbs when you get to 7th level.
The only downside is at level 3 you get improved critical, and then you don't get anything else till 7th level. And improved critical is actually really powerful mathematically, but it doesn't feel that way.
Yes,
because unless you're in a smaller table rolling a lot of attacks, which you will as a fighter, no question, hopefully. Otherwise, what are you doing? You'll get it a lot. It's so worth it. There's a reason you don't get anything else until the 7th level here.
Well, in 7th level, basically they tell you what you should already have figured out with this subclass, which is you should be running and jumping over stuff to get right up in your enemy's face. Like get over your enemies,
get those crits,
get way back in the back where the squishies are.
Really
and
are
crit them.
You're a crit hunter.
Yeah, that's exactly what this class is. This subclass. You build your class this way. It's how to bypass all of the front line, like in football, to get to the soft quarterback and crit his ass. Keep in mind,
you can put feats on top of this. You have action surges in addition to this. So
if that wasn't enough by now, at 10th level, they're like, hey, by the way, we knew you were good at hunting crits.
I really like this.
Have a fighting style.
I wish more... I so many times would rather get another fighting style class feature than I would like a language or a skill proficiency.
Oh, totally.
Because it's so much more likely that my fighter picks up another fighting style from someone he meets than it is than he decides, oh, I've learned a new language. I'm like, we've been murdering things for the last month. How did you have time to study this?
I was reading it while we're taking long
Who
lists.
have you been talking to?
Duolingo, bro.
How'd you learn the pronunciation? What? That makes less sense to me than, oh, I learned how to use the bow. Right?
Yeah.
Because if a fighter's like, I've been studying the blade, like, you're like, oh, he probably
I agree.
did.
My whole point is, like, we should be able to pick which one of those we want. They shouldn't be mutually... Anyway, that's a separate rant. Right. I don't want to get...
But then again, 15th level, we see...
At 15th level, it doubles down. It's like, look, you should be hunting crits. And now, if you're not already getting them at least 15% of the time, you are. Think about that. Right. 18 through 20 is 15% of the time when you roll a d20,
it's
you crit.
It's a crit. That's exciting.
It doesn't mean you auto-hit.
No. But it's cool.
I know. It's super great. Especially if you use like modified crits with cards or anything else. It's just a super fun mechanic.
If you have any extra
This is the kind of class feature you're going to take it to feel like cool. A badass when you win.
Since you and I play with crit and fumble cards, because we used to have the crit and fumble tables back in the day, we like that extra bit. Crits are extra fun to get.
And then, I mean, it just basically doubles down at 18th level that you're like Spartacus.
You just don't die.
Nobody's going to kill you. You don't die. You regain hit points equal to 5 plus your con mod if you have no more than half of your hit points left. That's the start of each of your turns.
It's pretty nuts.
It's sort of like, you're not going to kill me. But then again, at 18th level, the amount of damage...
It can be bursty at that point.
Right. So...
18th level. What is balance?
So this next one is actually my favorite.
And this is your favorite one?
I like this one because I have a real soft spot.
I think you know what my favorite one is.
For gishy characters. And gishy...
Who doesn't love a good gish?
Means,
we should explain that, because the first time I heard that, I was like, what the fuck is that about?
So, a gishy character is a character that's basically fighty and magic-y. They have both. And the next one we're talking about, you probably already know, is the Eldritch Knight.
Doesn't the nomenclature come from like Githyanki and Githzerai?
Yes, it does. It's a derivation of that, because the Githyanki and the Githzerai originally were, especially the Githyanki, they were fighters who had psionic/magic powers, and they were good at both. And players, of course, would fight them in the monster manual and be like, why can't I have that? How do I learn what those guys did? I want to be a fighter with magic, or I want to be a magic-y person that fights. I want porque no las dos.
Mm-hmm.
And so...
That phrase is so appropriate here.
Right. So the term gish represents exactly that. And it's been kind of a holy grail for fighters for a couple of editions.
Of course. Like, this was a top-notch prestige class in 3.5.
Right.
Like, so much of the time, at least for me, playing a fighter in 3.5, I was like, okay, what cool prestige class am I going to take? My favorite one is the one where you could like polymorph parts of your body and do like the battle
Weapons,
changer
yes,
or whatever it was
yes.
called. It was so overpowered and ridiculous, but I loved it.
So I'm happy.
War Shaper. That was it.
I'm happy this one is in the PHB. That they're like, okay, here it is, and it does actually a very good job of it. You know,
I think
so
it does.
it
I'm
gives
so
you
happy I don't have to
spellcasting.
multiclass to a wizard anymore.
Right, it gives you spellcasting at 3rd level. You get cantrips, which, let's be honest, if you're playing a fighter, you're interested in blasty and damagey. So cantrips
This
are
just
great
also
for that.
gives
Just
you
like blam, blam, blam.
so many role-playing flavor abilities. There's so many characters that are like that knight with magical abilities. Also, if you need to be Sailor Moon, yeah, you can do that.
I mean, it's
I think
prevalent in anime.
I don't know. There's probably better classes you could play Sailor Moon as. We'll have to talk about that later. But you could.
Yeah, and I like this one because it also encompasses, it's like a wide swath of, you can add blast, or you can modify your weapon, or you can jump, because you get spells you can pick from, or you can jump around with like displacement or like, you know, dimensional door, these kinds of things that you get out of the Eldritch Knight that are nice.
So you get 2 cantrips off the bat, which is great.
And also spells at 1st level and higher. It picks your intelligence, so you know the trade-off here is you're never going to be as good with your spells as a straight-up wizard, but you have some brawn to back it up.
Yeah, it's more of just a supplement for your martial abilities. And choosing the right spells can be super handy. But even on top of this, you get other stuff. You get, of course, a cool magical weapon, which I always love having this weapon bond kind of ability.
Totally. So, and
the worst thing when you're like someone who relies on your weapon is when the DM like has your weapons taken away. And you're like, no, my magical sword.
but now I feel useless.
It's my baby. Why did you take it?
Will I ever get it back? Yeah, I mean, and this one is good. Like, it's sort of like the Arcane Archer, but a little bit more flexible and probably maybe melee focused.
It also makes me feel like Doctor Strange. A little bit. How I'm just like, poof, here it is. Oh. Right? You're just like, it just teleports to you once you've bonded to it. If you, as long as it's on the same plane of existence, right to your hand. Pretty great. This one is different than most. You can have 2 bonded weapons,
right,
which is pretty sweet.
Well, because dual wielding.
Yeah, but also because dual wielding, but it could also be a ranged weapon and a close weapon, which is pretty handy.
That's true.
Right?
That's true.
There's a lot of good possibilities
Flexibility.
there.
The fighter is always about flexibility.
I like that you're never disarmed with this one, which is super cool. Love it.
So another one is beginning at War Magic. When you get to 7th level, when you cast
powerful.
a cantrip, you can make a weapon attack as a bonus action.
This is a big deal.
So imagine if you're like a bow fighter and you didn't choose Arcane Archer, and you have this, you can cast a cantrip and attack with your crossbow or bow at the same time.
Now,
or you can cast a cantrip at another person next to you and attack with your sword at the same time.
At this point, the cantrips probably aren't doing too much. I don't believe they scale that hard.
They do some for damage, but
it's not Eldritch Blast, but it's okay, right? Some
right.
cantrips are pretty handy.
Right.
Either way, any extra action economy is great. The other thing to remember is you also have Action Surge on top of this. And Action Surge is important here because it's one of the few times in 5th edition where you can straight up just cast 2 spells. Because you're like, I have 2 actions to spend. I can cast 2 spells.
Neener.
One of the things that's important to remember when playing 5e, which can be kind of a buzzkill, is if you cast a spell on your bonus action, if you use your bonus action to cast a spell, you can then not use your main action to cast another spell.
I know.
It is written into the rules as what is like bonus spell limitation or whatever clause.
Yeah, it's in the bonus spells piece.
It's something Jeremy Cropper just clarified before.
You can only use it as a cantrip. You can cast your action as a cantrip.
It's a bit of poor design meant to just limit the lazy tack-on of bonus actions to certain things.
Yeah,
like
I agree.
Just adding the bonus actions onto the action
it's
economy.
Definitely something I homebrew ruled away.
So it's, however, when you're playing with the rules as written, that makes this class really cool.
It does.
Because you can do so many things in one turn. And there's a lot you can do with that, which I think is really cool.
I mean, Eldritch Strike, when you get to 10th level, allows you to...
Just right through resistance.
Right, and they have disadvantage on the next saving throw against the spell you cast. It's basically how do you make your fighting spells better.
I really love 15th level. You get Teleport. I love Teleport. It's always one of my favorite mechanics in any game.
Me too.
And so you just get the ability to teleport 30 feet. You can see when you use your Action Surge. So essentially, you could just make the most epic entrance ever. Yeah, you can teleport before or after the additional action. That gives you just have so many options with this class. Like that, even if the magic isn't as powerful, it's still fun and flavorful. And if you use the action economy well, like it's pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, and it just doubles down like it does.
It continues, yeah.
15th level, then you're just making more attacks every time you cast a spell.
You can just make a weapon attack as a bonus action if you cast a spell. So this is very much the sword in one hand, glowing ball of energy in the left hand, and you're like blasting and slashing and blasting and slashing kind of deal.
I mean, if we were... Gandalf is more than this, but if you're looking at Return of the King and how he was fighting, that's definitely what he was doing here.
Pretty much, yeah. I like this one. This is one that I've always enjoyed. I was happy to see the Eldritch Knight right away. The next one is one that I think is super underrated in terms of concept. The mechanics are a little lackluster, and it's one that most people forget about.
It first appeared in 3rd edition, and it was the closest thing there was to a quote-unquote knight prestige class.
A non-magical knight, essentially.
Yes.
It's not you're a really loyal knight, but you're not a paladin.
Right. I mean, now we have Cavalier and also this. It started out specific to the Forgotten Realms as well.
It always bumps up against paladin for me. I always pictured it as like a Knight of the Round Table knight.
Yeah, me too. I mean, it's exact, and that's how it portrays itself. And they called it originally the Purple Dragon Knight because in Cormyr, in the Forgotten Realms, which is now in 5e the default setting, they have an order of knights, the Purple Dragon Knights, who are your quintessential Arthurian style.
Yes,
we are Knights of the Table.
I mean, I love it. It's great.
And part of why it was powerful in 3rd edition was it was one of the only prestigious classes you could get that lets you add extra dice to your damage dice.
Right. Adding to damage is always fun. Who doesn't like doing more damage? The thing that's important to notice, and there's a note in the book here, it's actually from the Sword Coast Adventurer's Guide, so this can be one that a lot of people don't know exists, or they can't find it, and sometimes people won't allow it in games because it's specific to the Purple Dragon Knights.
Right. You have to scrape off a lot of serial numbers.
But you can just scrape off a little bit and call it a banneret or a banner knight.
Yep.
Right? Because that's what it is. If you've played Banner Saga, you know what I'm saying.
Or even Game of Thrones counts too.
Right? It's the knight with the banner, inspiring the allies a bit, right? And so it makes a note to just call it a banneret otherwise. So if you really want to play this and your DM doesn't have Purple Dragon Knights in the setting, that's fine. Just you're a banner knight or a banneret. Go with it that way. So let's get into the mechanics and why we think they could be a little better, probably. At least that's how I feel. Rallying Cry at 3rd level. You learn how to inspire... Blah. I cannot talk today. But you learn how to... Apparently, this guy does, because he inspires his allies to fight on past their injuries somehow. Essentially, if you use Second Wind... You can choose up to 3 creatures within 60 feet of you that are allied with you. They each regain hit points equal to your fighter level, provided they can see and hear you. Now, here's the thing. Like, at no point is your fighter level going to be a ton of hit points. Right. But this is really handy to raise people who are maybe busy making death saves. Right? If someone is down and they're within 60 feet of you, which is a good amount of space, and allied with you, this is that moment where you call for your allies to their feet. It's a good flavor moment, and honestly, sometimes just raising them up and boosting that action economy is one of the most powerful things you can do in a fight.
I mean, or even
if
you give them a little bit of hit point boost, that means maybe that the cleric doesn't have to heal them this round, which means the cleric can do something else, so it takes off a little pressure.
Also, it's 60 feet is a good amount of range,
It's
right?
a long range, and it doesn't include your enemies, so it's only your allies, so you can do it in the middle of everything.
Healing word is what, 30 feet?
Right. And if you're playing a knight, the chances are probably also that there are soldiers or something like that. So this is really excellent for a roleplay reason to be like, my soldiers are...
This bolstered. One I think is pretty good because HP is pretty powerful in 5e, right? And if you're giving, like, let's say 3 HP to 3 characters, you're handing out 9 HP. If we compare that to a Paladin's Lay on Hand feature, not too bad.
Yep.
At 3rd level, right? It's pretty comparable almost.
So what's interesting to me about this one next is that with Royal Envoy at 7th level, they give you proficiency in the persuasion skill.
This is that lore role-playing aspect again. Which I like. It's very knightly.
Or if you already have it, you can pick one of the other ones, but it's double. They double your proficiency bonus on it.
It makes you very persuasive.
So they double you down on I am a knight of the realm, and I will come to you, and I will serve you, but you must first listen to what I have to say.
I like the persuasiveness, because sometimes as a fighter, you get dismissed as if you're trying to be a face, or, you're not the bard.
Right.
Or the warlock. Or the sorcerer, those charisma-based classes, because they end up being the face because the mechanics of the game.
Or the cleric.
Sometimes, yeah, I guess so. But
definitely the paladin.
My one thing with this, I think this would make so much more to the class, is just add a combat benefit aspect to this feature.
That would be a good addition.
I like how it is. I don't think it's bad. I think if they just added this gives you some kind of combat benefit that has to do with inspiring your allies, or maybe you can take an action and some kind of bonus, like advantage to an ally or something like that.
I think that you get some of that with the next one at Inspiring Surge at 10th level.
But I have level 10.
I have a criticism here, and it's not even that it's level 10. So Inspiring Action is when you use an Action Surge, you can pick another creature that is an ally and let them have it, basically. But instead of the Action Surge, they just get another attack. And that's, I think, the criticism that I have. If you're spending your Action Surge on somebody else, they should be able to do anything with that action surge that you could do, not just an attack.
So you can choose one creature that's out that creature.
Right?
Does this mean you don't get your other action surge abilities?
Yeah, so you're
giving your action to them at range of 60 feet.
Correct, but it's reduced. It's only an attack. And the criticism I have
one
of it
melee
is
or ranged weapon attack.
they should be able, if you're spending your action surge, they should be able to do something else with it too.
Or maybe you should just make it like how it is written for starting at 18th level. You can choose 2 allies.
I mean, yeah, if you want to accelerate
it's
it.
extremely powerful for 10th level, but because keep in mind, if you have a barbarian in your party, you know, like there's I could see places for this being useful, but most of the time you're going to be in the thick of it as a fighter yourself.
But it's not necessarily you are. But if I'm doing this at a range, that means I may want to grant somebody an action back in the back line, like a wizard or a rogue or whatever.
That's true.
And I want them to not have to have it be an attack. I want to be able to say,
this is where the fighter calls for Hawkeye to shoot something down.
Right. Or we really need you to open that door now, Spider-Man. You know, you really, like grant somebody an extra action.
That's Black Widow's job. Okay.
Okay. Fine. Whatever.
Jeez.
My point is that the action itself as a whole, I think, should translate, not just an attack. It's that if you're spending, because you can do whatever you want with an action surge. You can cast a spell, you can make an attack, you can open a lock, you can do anything.
Definitely.
And that's what I think should transfer. So but that's, not rules as written.
Yeah, I think that would be an easy way to make it more powerful, though, right? Is essentially just give them the free action entirely.
Yeah.
Because the one thing here is, like, you can't cast a spell?
Exactly.
Lame.
Especially if it's an attack spell.
God, they love just limiting spell economy so much. Good thing we're talking about the fighter. So, Bulwark is their last ability.
They don't have an 18th level ability.
Yeah, they don't.
Only 15.
Right? This, like, I love the idea of this banneret class, but it doesn't really do that much to inspire its allies. You know, a level 1 bard is probably...
You have to get to this level to get at 15,
you
finally.
just play a bard. Seriously, just play a bard who has a banner and wears armor, and you're going to be a better banneret than the banneret class.
Maybe actually is not a bad idea.
But this can be great if you like the flavor and you don't care about that. So, Bulwark 15th level, you can essentially extend benefit of Indomitable feature to an ally. Indomitable is when you have to roll for a save and you fail. It's a fighter ability. You can essentially re-roll it instead. But the thing is, what I hate about this feature is you can only help them reroll an intelligence, wisdom, or charisma saving throw. And you can't be incapacitated. You have to be within 60 feet of you. It's just not that good. There's too many conditions. Why not just all the saving throws?
I mean, like I said...
Why limit it to intelligence, wisdom, and charisma?
Well, the bard actually is a better idea. I think, like I said earlier, it's not all of them are
glad
balanced.
Wisdom's in there because...
Some of these subclasses are better than others.
Yeah. I just feel like this one, like, if you have a player who wants to do it, you want to spruce it up a little bit for them, I would.
Maybe. Yeah. I agree. Add some homebrew content, make it a little bit better. The samurai is the next one, I think, and it captures actually the essence of a samurai very well.
This one's my favorite. I have to make an important note here. This is a more historical, slightly realistic samurai. Or interpretation as in the class. This is not an anime samurai where you're like cutting the wind at a distance and like have a ranged attack, which is really cool. This is different.
Yes.
But
this
I
is
agree
the historical.
with you. This does a really good job at capturing kind of like the knight. Like,
the samurai knight
of Japan.
And what's interesting is that we have the cavalier, which is like your Western mounted knight. Although they don't call it a knight. We have the Eldritch Knight, which is the only one with the actual knight name in it, and it's not anything to do with knighthood. It's about magic.
Yeah.
And then you have the samurai, which interestingly is sort of the because of...
Aside from the banneret, he's pretty knightly. He's right up there.
I mean, he's more
That's
like
the banneret's only thing. Don't take it from him.
The banneret, I would say, is more like the marshal from 3.5.
Okay. Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
And
a lame version.
Yeah, more lame version. And the samurai is, I think it captures the essence of it very well, and that Eastern style knight,
I mean, it's great. This class is really built around the unbreakable will, yield or die fighting.
But you also have access to history and performance as skills.
So we
for
see
your
the
proficiency.
knightly kind of flavor coming in again
right.
you gain proficiency in history, insight, performance, persuasion, or you can learn the language of your choice, which is cool. Same thing, right? It's literally the same feature. Third level, though, is kind of your signature ability.
I mean, fighting spirit, right?
Yeah.
You really want this attack to hit, so you use your fighting spirit to give you that extra boost.
It's like your stance,
right? And it gives you advantage on your attack and temporary hit points.
Here's the thing, though: it gives you advantage on all weapon attack rolls until the end of your current turn.
You really, really, really mean it.
And when you do so, you gain 5 temporary hit points. Those hit points increase to 10 at 10th level and 15 at 15th level. This is really good because, one, you're going to have multiple attacks, right?
You will
with
not
action
defeat
surge.
me today!
And advantage is essentially a +5 on your attacks.
Yeah.
This ensures your attacks are probably going to hit. This is great. You get extra hit points as you do it. So it's like reckless attack, except it protects you. That's pretty nice. The thing is, you can only use this 3 times. You can regain all expended uses of it on a long rest. This is like that samurai focus moment, you know? Like,
I know, I love it. It's
Yeah,
totally
I love
great.
it.
And
It's
from a
super
mechanic
cool.
perspective, it keeps you in the fight longer, so it's a really useful skill.
it's a great
So
skill.
even if you change
Dude,
the tone of samurai
temporary
to
hit
something
points is
else,
always good in
it's
5e.
super good. Plus advantage on attack
You
rolls.
cannot go wrong with 5 temporary hit points and advantage on attack rolls.
So this is some of where I think at 7th level you get the next one, Elegant Courtier.
Back to the flavor.
Right, and this is they do this with a lot of these, and I think
This one has a combat component to it, though, so I think it's better than the last class.
I mean, yes, and it gives you bonuses on persuasion for your charisma check. You also gain it to your wisdom mod,
See,
and
I
it
like
gives you
that.
bonus on wisdom saving throws.
That's the thing. You gain proficiency in wisdom saving throws. If you already have this proficiency, you gain proficiency in intelligence or charisma saving
Because
throws.
you are so
Can we just
elegant in
tack
your
that onto the Banner Knights?
your mind
that
is
part?
right. Your
Like,
mind is
literally
so
the
well
same
trained.
paragraph.
You just are better at
But that's what I was
resisting these.
talking about with the Banneret. I'm like, why not give them the exact same little paragraph there for them?
Yeah, but start instead of with wisdom, go with charisma because
Yeah.
it's a banneret.
Exactly. Why not?
Would be
See,
an
that's
easy
how
mechanical
I like.
change.
This is exactly what I was talking about in that last one. Like, give a combat benefit to it as well if it's like all you're getting at 7th level.
So at 10th level, you get Tireless Spirit, which basically lets you roll initiative, and when you roll it and you have no uses of your Fighting Spirit, which you only get 3 times,
3 times
before,
per long
you
rest,
gain 1.
which
right?
is great. The
So this-
classic, like, you're never empty.
Right.
Quiver's never empty ability.
Right, except you're a samurai, so, of course, we're in war. We'll continue to have some more stamina. We never run
Yeah.
out. And it actually works really well for any kind of quote-unquote knight. It's just sort of like, keep going, keep going, keep going.
Yeah. Rapid Strike is a cool one. I almost wish you got it a little bit sooner, but it's pretty cool. You get to essentially have advantage on attack roll against any target that you attack, but you can forego that advantage for that roll to make an additional weapon attack against that target as part of the same action. You're getting a lot of advantage from your other abilities, right?
Yeah, but you can, if you get rid of your advantage, this is a combo ability.
Yeah.
If you get rid of your
Yep.
advantages you got from Fighting Spirit,
Yep.
you get an extra attack.
That's pretty sweet.
I like that trade-off.
That's nice. I like having those attack options.
This feels like a meaningful choice that you get to make. Like, is it worth?
Yeah.
And it's powerful
You
too.
know it's good because it has the clause. You can do so no more than once per turn. When you
Yes,
see that
yes.
phrasing, you're like, this ability is really fucking good, and they're specifically going to limit you because it would break the game otherwise.
Right.
Rapid Strike is really cool. You have to keep in mind you're combining this with Action Surge and Fighting Spirit. Think about that. Fighting Spirit, you get advantage on all attack rolls.
You can get like 5, maybe
Yeah.
6 attacks per round.
Samurai is getting probably some of the best action economy out of these classes. I
There's
think.
your slash of wind.
Yeah. Right?
Exactly.
Pretty sweet. So
The last one is Strength Before Death at
this
18th
one
level.
is like risky. It's very in flavor though. I really like it. I would totally pull it off. This is essentially what my Undead Samurai in our other campaign does, but he comes back to life.
Yeah, basically, if you would take an attack that takes you down to 0, instead you can use your reaction to delay that.
You're just like, no, death. Nope.
Like, nope, not
Not
yet.
right now, Grim Reaper.
Your hit points still go
Oh.
to 0,
You immediately take an extra turn
and you have to take saving throw failures as normal,
through
but
the turn.
you get an extra turn. So it's like, this is the one where in those old Kurosawa movies, the samurai is dead,
He keeps stumbling.
but takes 1 or 2 more attacks to kill his enemies
but-
and then falls.
Yep, you know that move.
It's very dramatic.
Where you
I
know he's
love it.
dead, but he somehow, like, his body just takes out
doesn't
3
matter.
more guys.
Right.
Yeah, I love that one. It's always like that old samurai, like it's the Obi-Wan dying moment. You're like, no, but there's more like killing and blood.
Right.
It's more like D&D.
And that's it. That covers all the things we were going to cover today, I think, in subclasses for the fighter.
Oh, the one thing we should talk about, because we missed it at the start and we intended to talk about it, was just the fighter's abilities really quick. I think it's they're pretty simple and straightforward, but it's important to keep them in mind as you're choosing a subclass and kind of picking how you want to build it. We'll just go through them really quick.
They're so straightforward that we didn't even think about it.
We didn't even think about it. We just figured you knew. If you got this far in our podcast, you probably already know. Second Wind essentially lets you do 1d10 plus your fighter level. You can do it on a short rest. free health,
You're
free
going to be
heal.
using this all the time.
You're going to use it
it's
all the
just
time.
How do I stay in the fight
It's
all
awesome.
the time?
Action Surge, we've talked about. You get a free action. Pretty freaking good. 17th level, you can use it twice before rest.
Plus
Awesome.
a fighting style. You get a fighting style as well. And, and this basically is how you're going to
Fighting
pick.
style is pretty cool.
It's how you're going to pick what your fighter is going to be about. Are you ranged? Are you shield?
Right.
Are you two weapons?
Archery, defense, dueling. This takes the place of having to take a bunch of feats.
Right.
Usually back in other editions, like if you wanted to start as a dual wielder, maybe you didn't have the feats to start dual wielding, or you could, but you would suck at it.
Right.
And none of your attacks would hit because you had negatives. It's really nice to be able to just have 2-weapon fighting off the bat without a ton of penalties.
Totally agree.
It used to be such a pain in the ass, and everyone wants to be Dritz Storden, so of course you have to have this option available.
I mean, he's badass.
Now, this is one area where I definitely would allow homebrew, or in this case, Unearthed Arcana. There's been some cool fighting style options in the Unearthed Arcana lately. It's one of my favorite things I've seen out of the last year's worth of stuff, which I think is great. It's definitely a place that, because all fighters get a fighting style, I think it's a good place to expand it to allow for different flavors, because it's a feat that really makes each fighter a little bit more distinct. But yeah, that one is, of course you have a fighting style. You're a fighter. The other one we talked about was Indomitable, which is you can reroll a saving throw that you fail.
I will not be beaten.
Yeah, exactly. You get this at 9th level. You can just say no, essentially. It's the player's version of Legendary Resistance.
Right.
It's not quite as good. Essentially, you use the new roll, and then you have to use a long rest to get the feature back. Once you hit 13th level, you can use it twice. And,
I mean, it's good for any scenario.
yeah, it's just always good to have. You never know.
You're tougher. You're just tougher as a fighter.
So yeah, fighter. It's pretty much the fighter in a nutshell. It's pretty straightforward. It really, though, because it's kind of like almost a blank slate a lot of the time, it really lets the player do so much. And that's why I was saying it's kind of weird having all that elven flavor in the Arcane Archer, right? Because all the other fighter classes they hone in on that versatility. You could do so much with just that subclass.
Plus elves sometimes.
And
what about dwarves?
Even the purple Dragonites, they give you a generic name to use for them.
Right.
And so that's why Arcane Archer, I'm like, maybe this should have just been a ranger class.
Or take out the elf bit.
Yeah, I don't know.
Anyway, that's it as far as fighters. That's all there is to go.
Yeah,
go over,
you really
I think.
can't go wrong with a fighter.
I mean, it's never a bad choice. Even if you have multiple in the party, it's not going to shoot you in the foot.
If you like hitting stuff with the weapon, that's the class to be.
All right, I think next time we're going to talk about Wizard.
But before that, we'll probably talk about some other game design stuff. Maybe reward loops and experience points.
Ooh.
Yeah, how to level up.
All right, until next time.
See ya.